All right, guys, this is going to be fun. I am excited to welcome back my friend, Erin Rollenhagen. As you probably remember, Erin is a crazy cool human, and she's the founder and CEO of Entrepreneurial Technologies, which is a people-friendly tech company based here in my town, Des Moines, Iowa. She's also the author of Uprising, which is an incredible book that encourages entrepreneurs and business leaders to trust their purpose and embrace impact as the true measurement of success. Now, Erin joined us back in episode 253, which you probably remember, and we talked about being both strong and authentic and how that is in fact possible. It is a powerful episode and one of our most popular of 2020. So you're going to want to go back and check that out if you haven't heard that one. We'll put that the resources of this episode. Now, since we last talked, a little thing like a pandemic hit. Maybe you've heard about it. But Erin has continued in her leadership at Entrepreneurial Technologies, but she's also found herself consulting entrepreneurs and other business leaders to navigate the wild emotional ride of entrepreneurship and leadership in life in general, as well as during these crazy times. We recently connected and I heard about that work and I wanted her back on the show to talk about some of these strategies she uses herself, as well as what she suggests for her clients, especially when it comes to our emotions and thriving at any time, but especially during unpredictable times. So let's get to this. Erin, welcome back to Dream Think Do.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Good to have you. Okay, so just give us a quick snapshot of how you're doing. I had to go back. It was January of last year that we talked. So what are a couple of the things that have been happening for you over the last year and a half?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the first thing is, leading a company during a pandemic,
Right?
obviously not something that I learned about at my alma mater, the University of Iowa.
No, not covered in any school. Yeah, definitely. There was no semester on how to handle pandemics. That's
Right,
right.
right. So that has been just kind of a journey of trying to figure it out day by day in
Yeah.
terms of how to lead that, and really coming through it pretty well on the business side, but appreciating some of the aspects that we often neglect, like the emotional side of that journey.
I think that's huge. And that's why when we talked and you were sharing some of the stories of what you've been up to on this front of helping leaders, helping entrepreneurs navigate this, especially around emotions. I mean, that's the thing that immediately hit me is, I think back to my business education and it's like, we learned a lot of the black and the white, the spreadsheets, all of those things, the accounting, all of that. And I even had some leadership stuff, but very rarely would we talk about the emotions of
Right.
things. And it's so wildly important for us interpersonally, but also as leader, as entrepreneurs, if we're wanting to motivate a group, persuade a group, whatever it is, sell something to someone, the emotions are so important. So I want to dive into that with you. So when you're working with leaders, entrepreneurs, what are some of the big issues that come up, especially around this topic of emotions?
So I think the biggest thing is people feeling like they're not supposed to have emotions. So there's the emotion that comes out. Something bad happens.
Yeah,
Often it's negative, right? Something bad happens because nobody's upset about their positive emotions.
right. Exactly. Like, woohoo. Yeah.
Yeah, you're
Good
not
point.
judging your positive emotions. You're judging your negative emotions. So
Yeah.
something happens, you get mad or you get upset, and you're going into a spiral about it. And then you're judging the fact that you are having this emotion
Yeah.
because we all perceive that the other entrepreneurs aren't having those emotions.
Right. Right. We're the only ones. Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Yeah. And so, if I'm having a bad day, I'm thinking, well, Mitch wouldn't have been upset about this. Mitch would have handled it just fine.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're trying to filter that. Absolutely.
Right. So we're in the moment of whatever has just happened. And then on top of that, we're feeling like we should be handling this differently and we should be
Hmm.
feeling differently about it. And we're
Yeah.
not supposed to be upset or angry or whatever the emotion is. And so it's very easy to get yourself into a spot where you think, I just can't do this. I'm not the
Yeah.
right person for this, because if I were the right person, I wouldn't be feeling this way about it.
Wow. Yeah.
And so
That's very true.
very quickly it goes from a standard business problem like I lost that account, I didn't get the sale I wanted, right, which is a
Yeah.
normal business problem, to I am a terrible entrepreneur and I'm not cut out for this.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can go very quickly. I know I'm a recovering worrier as well. I'm not great, but I'm better than I was yesterday. And I can go from 0 to freaked out in 2.3 seconds if I'm not, intentional about this very process. So that's so true. That awareness is so key. So I'm curious to hear how you got this, like how you became aware of this, but also what do you suggest when people start to feel that spiral start to kick in?
So I think I became aware of it. Somebody, and man, I wish I remember who it was and I would thank them, but somebody at one point said to me when I was having one of those moments,
Yeah.
think of one phone call that you could get that would completely turn this around for you. And so I
Huh.
think about it. Now, if you're one phone call away from things being in a completely different spot, it's probably not that bad.
That does help to change a perspective pretty quickly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
That's
good.
interesting.
Yeah.
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 I love it. So when you're working with entrepreneurs, when you're working with leaders, what are some of the tools? Let's get into your toolbox a little bit. What are some of the things that you help people with, when they're either blindsided by something, when they have a big setback? Like you said, it's not generally, we're not weighing out and worrying about positives or positive emotions, but it's oftentimes when challenges hit.
Right. So the first thing you have to do is you have to start treating your time and your energy the way you treat your money. And you have to
Uh,
give yourself some margin in your budget.
yeah.
Right. If you're doing a financial budget, you don't spend every penny. Any financial planner you talk to will tell you the first thing you got to do, don't allocate every penny because
Yeah.
something's going to come up and you need to be able to react to that. Right.
Yep. Yep.
Got to have
Absolutely.
that savings,
Yeah.
a little bit of extra.
Exactly right.
You need that in your
Absolutely.
time and your energy too.
Yep.
And so many of us, I think busyness becomes a status symbol,
Yep. Something
you
we
know?
brag about. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so busy. Oh, my schedule is so full. It's like, really? We want to brag
Yeah.
about that. Yeah.
In 1950, if you ask somebody how they were, the number one answer was fine.
Interesting.
Today, if you ask somebody how they are, the number one answer is busy.
Huh. That's fascinating and convicting. It's so true. That's so true. So yeah, absolutely. Having that awareness. And I don't know about you. I think we've talked about this a little bit too, but I'm an introvert and I do a lot of extroverted things. So for me, one of the biggest things is I have to build in introvert recoup time into my
Mhm.
calendar, especially if I'm doing a lot of stuff with groups or interviews or coaching calls or whatever. I have to get some rejuvenation time, which means introvert time, only me, quietly tucked away someplace, all of that. So I know that's one of the ways that I do that. How do you suggest people start to work that into their budget? Because I think you're exactly right. Most people are spending every minute, just like they're spending every penny. What are some of the ways that you suggest people start making changes on that front?
I think first thing you can do is people, if I say that to someone, they inevitably say, that's great, Erin, but I don't have time.
Yeah. Right. You
Right.
say you need to find time. I don't have time. Their
Right. And,
response.
it's a little bit like that quote about meditation, meditate half an hour a day, unless you don't have time, in which case meditate for an hour.
That's very good. Yes.
But so the first thing I would do is get an app. I use Harvest. There's all sorts of apps out there. Get something and track your time for a week,
Yeah.
but only track the time when you are actually doing things that are legitimately productive.
Interesting.
So don't track the time that you spend waiting for a meeting to start.
Aha.
Don't track the time you spend putzing through your emails, not really accomplishing anything.
Yeah.
Don't track the time that you spend, ruminating on that conversation that you wish you would have handled differently,
Yeah.
or hovering over spreadsheets that you can't change, or
Yeah.
don't track any
Absolutely.
of that. Track only the actual productive time.
Interesting.
I guarantee you it's less time than you think. And you're going
Yeah.
to feel judged when you see that, right? Your initial
Yeah.
reaction is going to be, no, this number has to be a high number because that's what makes me feel good about myself, is that I think I work 60 hours a week, or I think I
Right.
work 45 hours a week. And that's how I feel good about myself, right? But throw that out, be honest. How much are you actually productive? When I did it, 25 hours a week,
Wow.
right?
Yeah.
Now, how much would I tell you I work?
That's right. How much do I feel like I'm sitting at a desk somewhere? Yes,
Right.
absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
A lot more than that, right? But when I found that, it's actually super freeing
Yeah.
because now I know that I have 15 hours a week out of the regular workday that are my margin,
Yeah. Very true.
right?
Yeah, because that time you've identified that time as less than productive or wasted time. So it's like, all right, if we got all that done in 25 hours, if like you got all that you do done in 25 hours, then to go, okay, I guess maybe I do have some time to play with. So I think that that's huge. And I think you're exactly right of don't judge yourself, because if you stay in judgment, you're not going to have your best thinking. But if you're able to take a look at that, that can be really freeing. That's huge.
Yeah. So then step two is you take that time and you figure out what kind of a schedule is optimal for you. You know,
Uh-huh.
in my case, if I'm not careful, I end up with all these half-hour gaps between meetings,
Yeah.
and that's not great time, right? It's hard
Right.
for me to get into anything. I'm just sitting there waiting for the next meeting to start, anxiously scrolling through my email or something,
Right. Right.
not helpful. So the next step then is to figure out, okay, if I could choose my schedule, what would it be?
Hmm. I
Would I
love it.
want everything back to back? Is that good for me? Do I need certain breaks in between there? Is that better for me? Do I want an hour between each meeting so that I can, have some recharge time or maybe get into another project? And then just start working toward that schedule.
Yeah. That's great. I'm actually writing notes, Erin, which is I think the biggest compliment, right? Like when you see somebody lean down and start writing, you're like, yeah. So I'm guessing the audience just did too. So I love that. So first, it's just taking an honest look at how you're spending your time, kind of looking at your current budget, right? Second, it's saying, what would the ideal schedule look like? Not in some rainbows, butterflies, and little ponies kind of way of, well, I'd always be on a beach in Tahiti. No, it's like, no, but like what would those blocks look like? So I think it's a great example though of you saying, all right, naturally, when you started to really take a hard look at your schedule, you're realizing you got these half-hour meetings or half-hour openings between meetings that's not all that usable. So then you started to say, all right, I want to make something better. I'm going to start working towards that. So for you, what's an example of, if we know you had these 15 to 30-minute blocks, which were probably not all that useful, how have you, like, what's an example of one of the shifts that you've made?
So for me, I can look at the type of work I do, and there's kind of two categories. There's
Yeah.
meeting with people is one category of work I
Right.
do, right?
Yep.
And well, I wouldn't want a day that was 16 half-hour meetings back to back. That would be not good.
Right.
It's actually not a bad thing for me to I'm an introvert, get into my uh, extrovert groove a little bit and
Yeah.
have the meetings back to back, maybe for half a day.
Yeah. And just get
So,
those all done. Right. Like,
right,
oh gosh, that feels so good when you're like, all right, all that people time condensed. Now I got introvert time. That's
right.
great. Yeah. And
And
I
then
would
the other,
imagine for you, that's also probably a matter of, because I know you've got a team, you've got people that are also probably have access to your time or schedule. So probably setting expectations with them that that's how you're going to start to, like, those kinds of rhythms or where you're going to start to shoot for.
right. When I do one-on-ones, they're always back to back,
Yeah.
because then I can get in that rhythm.
Yeah.
I can get my energy up for it. I know that this is what I'm doing for the morning, do my one-on-ones back to back, everything's good. The
That's amazing.
second category of work I have is stuff that I need a lot of focus for, and I
Yeah.
can't do it in 20 minutes here or there.
Yeah.
I'm writing, or I'm designing a system, or,
Sure.
I'm thinking through something and I need like minimum a 2-hour block of time to really get into the groove of that and be heads down on it.
Yeah.
So the second thing I do is and those are appointments with myself, right? That
Right.
nobody else is involved with that. I put them in my calendar. I used to not put them in my calendar. And I knew that I was targeting, say, Thursday afternoon to do
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
but it wasn't in my calendar.
Right. It was in your mind, but not in your calendar. So other people probably tried to grab up that time, or it was probably harder to protect that time.
Yeah. So I started putting it in my calendar. It's actually in the calendar now as an appointment with myself.
Wow. That's awesome. And do you find like that kind of focus time, that thinking time, are you better at that in the morning? Are you better at that in the afternoon? Or does that not matter as much as just having that protected time?
the most important thing is having that protected time, and knowing I have that protected time actually
Yeah,
reduces the mental load all of the rest of the time, because I
very true.
know I've got that time set aside to do these things that are kind of, I don't want to say hanging over my head. That seems negative, but they're on the list and I know they need done.
Yeah, they are on your radar. They are important, right? And like you said, it's draining if you know you've got something out there that you have to do, but you don't know when you're going to be able to get to it. Right.
Right.
That's like having something left undone. They always say there's just nothing more draining than a job left undone. And I
Mm.
would say there's nothing more draining than a big job where you don't know when you're going to do it. So I think that is so powerful. And I love that, when we talk about getting better in our emotions with our emotions, you started with, all right, we got a boundary, right? Like we got a
Mhm.
self-care here first in order to
Right.
then move on to other things. Like we got to take care of us first. So I think this is super powerful.
Right. And if I think about for myself, and I think about the times that I've witnessed where somebody is really, they're just at at their wits end. They're feeling like, I can't do this anymore. This isn't for me. I'm not cut
Yeah.
out for this. They're really in that dark place. It's not because they're working hard, because people like hard work. They like to
Yeah.
feel like they're really giving their all for
Yep.
something. It's not because they're facing challenges, because again, people get up for a challenge, right? It's because they feel like they have nothing left to give,
Hmm.
and you have reached that point where there's there's another challenge looming and you don't have anything left in the tank. And that's
Yeah.
the moment where people go to a really dark place.
Yep.
And so if you can keep yourself out of that by building those boundaries in and saying, nope, I know something's going to come up that I don't control,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because that's life, that's entrepreneurship. Things are going to
Yep.
come up that we don't control.
Yep. And have margin for that. Now, a question comes to my mind. We didn't talk about this before, but a question comes to my mind is, when somebody's making these changes to their schedule, and, as entrepreneurs, a lot of times, it might be perceived that we've got ultimate control and we can always say we own every part of our schedule, but we don't. There's a lot going on. But I know a lot of our listeners too, they might work within an organization, be a part of a team, and they may not feel like they have total control over their schedule. What are some of the ways that you teach people, or phrases you give people to help them start to take a stand for their schedule? How do you equip them, just even with language, to share? You don't want to come off as saying, you know what, I'm protecting my schedule and screw you all, but it's that same time of, you do have to start doing it differently. So how do you equip people with making this kind of stand?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of it is just to the extent you can, stop apologizing for it. Create space for the
Yep.
things that you need to do. And
Yeah.
so if you have, and obviously everyone's work situation is different, but if you're able to say, all right, I know I need to do client meetings, and I'm going to reserve Tuesdays and Thursdays for client meetings. So you're creating space for it. You're not saying I'm not going to do this.
Yeah.
You
Right.
know, you create a plan, have it set up so that it's ready to go. I use Calendly. I resisted it for a long time, but there are great scheduling
Oh,
programs out there where you can literally just set that up.
yep. And that's
Um,
the only windows you give. And that's the only windows and people have to find their slot. I love Calendly.
yeah,
Absolutely. Huge.
it's perfect. And
Yep.
and no one's offended by it. You're not, going back and forth for 20 minutes trying to find a time slot.
Exactly.
It's very
Yeah.
easy. It's simple.
Yep.
Right. So I think number one, a lot of times you just don't even need to apologize for it.
I think
Just
that's huge. Yeah.
if you do feel like you need to talk about it for whatever reason, the question comes up or whatever it may be, say, this is how I'm able to give you my best. I'm doing this so that I can be at my best in this meeting.
Yeah.
I had to tell a client one time who always wanted to meet on Fridays, I don't do client meetings on Fridays. Why? Because I'm not at my best by Friday.
Yeah.
You
That's
know,
great. And you want to give your best, right? Like that's
right?
what you want to give your client. That's great. How did they receive that? Were they open to it?
It took a while. I kept
Yeah.
getting the Friday meeting requests for a while. And finally I said, I'm not going to accept these. I'm
Yeah.
not going to be at my best. And I want to be at my best for you.
Good for you. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. All right. So I think that is fantastic. So when we start to build a stronger foundation, especially whether it's leading, whether it's being creative, all of those things, when we're taking care of ourselves emotionally, that so often can depend on how we're spending our time. So I love that. What's another tool in the toolbox? This is so good.
I think it's really interesting to think about, and unexpected events like a pandemic really bring this into focus, I think, but to think
Right.
about the conflict between control and peace.
Yeah.
And
Very good.
as entrepreneurs or leaders in any sphere, I think a lot of times we want to believe that we are in control of things. And to some extent, we get paid to maintain the illusion.
Right. Exactly right. It's all in how good we are at faking that. Right.
Right. But if we dial it back, there's so little that we are actually truly in control of.
Yep.
Right? So very, very little. And a lot of of our efforts, especially when we get anxious, when we get upset, when we are feeling the pressure, are aimed at trying to get more control that we can't possibly have, right? I'll feel safe once I can finally control all the people under me and get them to do exactly what I want them to do.
Yeah.
Right? If I could do that, then I would feel good.
Yeah.
Let's say you and I are trying to build an airplane together.
Right.
And we're doing it remotely.
Okay. Sounds like a good task. Let's go for it. Yeah.
Right? So Mitch and I are going to build an airplane. And you're going to build the propeller, and I'm going to build the nose cone for it.
Okay.
And I think I know exactly how this should go. So I'm going to tell you step by step how to build this propeller. I'm not going to tell you what it should look like or anything like that. I'm just going to say, okay, step 1, I need you to cut a piece of metal like this. And then step 2, I need you to bend it. And step 3, I need you to drive some rivets into it. I'm going to give you step-by-step instructions for how to do this. And I'm going to do my part. And at the end, we're going to put this together. Do you think that plane's going to fly?
It would be amazing to see, right? Like, absolutely. I mean, the clarity would help in the process, but it's one of those where there's also so many things that could go wrong.
Right. So what if we did it this way? What if we worked together and we figured out what the blueprint was for this airplane?
Yeah.
And we agreed on the blueprint for the airplane and what the specs were, and how big it needed to be and how many RPMs we thought it needed to achieve and all of that. And so we agreed on this blueprint, and then I built my piece according to that blueprint, and you took whatever steps you thought were necessary to build your piece according to the blueprint. Do you think we'd do better?
I think we'd do better, because it's one of those that invites ownership, right? Like that is being in it together. That invites ownership. It's like you said, less, we're not white knuckling that control and saying no. Plus, I mean, when we're talking about our teams, like we hire these people, or, they are hired to do their work. Right. And I think it's so tempting sometimes to try to do other people's work. It's like, wait a second, then we're doing how many people's work and not letting somebody else thrive and do what it is that they do. So I love that. I think it's that inviting the ownership. It's loosening some of the control. I think that is so, so important, and probably much more rare than it needs to be.
Right.
Yeah.
And if I trace that back, especially if I look at my own career, the times when I've had trouble doing that, there was a lot of ego for me invested in my own personal contribution to the outcome. Right.
Yeah.
I had it in my head, my self-worth about what I was doing had a lot to do with how much of my personal work was in that outcome.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. And the satisfaction, the confidence, all of those things are all wrapped up in that, right? Now, how did you break free from that then?
It took a while, because I came up as an individual producer. I was a programmer, right?
Right.
So, and that was how I started. And so there was a time in my career where that was absolutely true, that me writing code was the thing I was there to do. And
that's how you brought value, right? That's how you showed you were you should be at the table. Absolutely.
Right. And so it was a big switch, and a painful switch for me to let go of that and say, actually this isn't where I bring the most value. And there's other people who can do this better than I can.
Yeah.
Being able to admit I'm not the best at something.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's other people who are better than me at this. And my job is to enable them.
Yeah.
And support them and provide them with what they need to actually do it. And if I do my job really well, a lot of times I'm kind of invisible.
It's true. But it is recognizing that your value now comes from drawing out other people's value as opposed to being the one that's got, to do the actual thing, whatever it is. I always say it's funny. It's like, as I coach people, as executive coach, sometimes I make people laugh, but I'll tell them, I've done my job as your coach. If after a year, you're absolutely blown away by your progress and what you've achieved, and kind of thinking, what the hell did Mitch do? Like, like as a coach, that's kind of my, that's my goal, is to draw out that. And it's the same thing as a leader. It's drawing out that value. And if we can do that, and I think part of it too is kind of in some ways holding loosely to who gets the credit.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Exactly.
I think that's a really big deal too, because I mean, it's like you spoke to having to reassess where you bring your value and how that value, how you define that value, all those things. So I think that's powerful. And for how long would you say, is that something you still have to be intentional about? Would you say that's now your habit, your natural bent, or would you say that that's something you still have to be real intentional with?
Since I haven't written code for many, many years now,
Yeah.
it's now my habit
Yeah.
to be that way. But there was a painful, I would say 3-year period
Yeah.
where what the company really needed from me was to get my hands out of that code.
That's right.
and,
Don't.
and focus on running the company,
Yeah. That's huge.
And I was fighting it.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's huge. And I think that that's so important, whether you're the leader or, so often, you can be in a position of leadership, but oftentimes you're in situations of leadership, whether you're working with peers or whether you're working on some, community or volunteer role where you're in a team of people, so often we can bring more value to the table by bringing out other people's value as opposed to jumping in and trying to control everything. So
Right.
good. So good. All right, let's bring it home with one more. What's one more tool? Because this is so important. What's one more tool when you're working with leaders, when you're working with entrepreneurs, when you're working with your own team? Where are you helping them out? Where's one other area that you touch on when it comes to the emotion of leadership and living?
I think that probably the number one thing you can do is recognize that it has to be sustainable for every single person in the food chain, right?
Yeah.
Whatever you're doing, nobody can be getting burnt out by this, or it's not going to work, or we don't have a real business. If our business depends on somebody getting burnt out in order for the thing to succeed, we do not have a real business here.
Wow. Yeah. That's huge. So how do you assess that? Is that a gut call for you initially? Is that watching your team? How do you watch for that? How do you guard against it?
It's actually, it's obvious, but we don't allow ourselves to acknowledge it. Right? It's not that you don't know when your teammate is burnt out.
Right. Yeah.
You can see it. You can tell when you talk to them. You can hear it in their voice. You can tell by the way they are responding to things.
Yep.
But we haven't been taught that it's okay to address that. We've been taught that we have to all be these robots and be exactly the same every day and focus 100% on our jobs and ignore our emotions and ourselves as human beings, right?
Yeah.
So it's not any big secret. It's giving yourself the permission to recognize it and acknowledge it. And sometimes it's as simple as saying, how are you?
Yeah.
How are you doing? And depending on the person, saying, do you need to take some time?
Yeah.
Do you need some time off? What can I do to support you? It's the question I open every one-on-one with is, what can I do to support you?
Wow. That's great leadership, right? Like that's important. That's when you're checking in on them as a human being first and a team member and employee second. And I think that is important. And I love one person had given me a question, because sometimes when you say, how are you doing? It's easy, especially if somebody's stressed out, it's easy to kind of dismiss that as, oh, they're just asking, they don't really mean it, all that stuff. It's like, how are you doing today? And it's like, so, just being able to say, no, really, like today, how are you? So I love that. Now, how about for you? Because I know that you've got a lot going on. Your business is thriving. You volunteer, you do a lot of different things. You've got your blog, all those things. How do you watch out for Erin when it comes to burnout? Like when you start to see the edge of burnout or when you see the tip of burnout, how do you guard against that for you personally?
So I think one thing that I learned some time ago is that burnout's not happening because I'm doing too many hard things. It's happening because I'm not doing enough of the things that recharge me.
Mm,
Right.
yeah.
And those are often linked. When I'm doing too many hard things, I feel like I don't have the bandwidth to do the things that recharge me, and I cut
Right.
them. Right. And no one's paying me to do those things in many cases, or no
Yeah.
one's yelling at me to do those things, or,
Right.
whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
So realizing that those things are important and I need to build them into my life on a regular basis.
Yeah.
So for me, painting is one of those things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of
And that's relatively new for you, right? Like that's something
Mhm.
that's just, you haven't always been a painter. This is something that's, you've kind of given yourself permission to explore more recently.
Yeah. I mean, I was always the kid who liked art class,
Yeah. All right.
and
Yeah.
enjoyed that. But I had a big issue with everything was so outcome based with me. And it was
Huh.
so hard for me to do anything, especially publicly,
Yeah.
that I wasn't immediately good at. And it was a big, worthiness thing in a way.
Sure.
I get my worth by doing a good job at things.
Right.
And I realized that if I'm going to be, a living, breathing, learning human on this earth for another 40 years or whatever, I'd better learn to try things and be okay with not immediately being good at stuff.
Huh. Wow.
Uh,
And
Otherwise,
so did you just with painting, was that something where you're like, you know what, I'm going to just try a painting class? Or how did you land on painting being one of the ways that you're now giving yourself that permission, that space to do that?
I mean, if you look at painting, it's like a relatively low barrier to entry, right? If I
Yeah.
wanted to take up pottery or something, there's a lot of equipment involved and you got
Right.
to rent space and all that. Painting, you can go down to Michael's and
Exactly. I get some paint, some canvas, and let's do this thing. Yeah.
right. So it's a pretty low barrier to entry.
Yeah.
Um, and I was at the beginning still so afraid of being bad at things in front of people that I didn't want to take a class because then I'd have to be bad at something in front of the instructor and the other class members,
Right.
right? So I was just doing it at home by myself, but I realized this is actually really freeing, especially if I make up my mind that the point is the enjoyment of the process,
Mm,
not what the outcome is.
yeah. Absolutely. And as you started to experience that freedom in painting, would you say that started to maybe have ripple effects in other areas as well?
Yeah. So, I mean, when we talk about STEM careers, it's now STEAM. So it's science, technology, engineering, math, and the arts. Uh,
Right.
right. And so we recognize that there's some brain chemistry things that happen when you open up those creative doors, even for people who are in traditionally sort of analytical professions like programming. So I think that it definitely helps with the innovation. But the other thing that it helps with is that margin we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
That's my margin.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, that's
Absolutely.
that's me building in some time to recharge. And so when I've had that time to recharge, and somebody else's thing may be something totally different,
Totally.
it's not
Right.
meaning the answer for everybody.
Right. The kayaking or whatever. Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. But having that time that I'm focused on, I am doing this for me because it's enjoyable for me,
Yeah.
is it's amazing.
That is huge. And we're going to bring it back around to our first tool. When it comes to painting, I'm curious, do you block out time for painting as well? Or do you just know that's going to be in your time at night or whatever? How do you do that?
I've actually thought about this because the other thing I'm aware of is that I want it to stay a hobby and not be a chore,
A
right?
task, right? Absolutely.
So I don't, but I am intentional about, like, I will know that Saturday morning I'm going to paint.
Yeah, that's good.
And I will
Yeah,
go get whatever supplies I need and be all set and ready to go and wake up that morning knowing that I get to have a lovely morning painting.
that's awesome. Well, and I know that that's one of the things they talk about too with perseverance is having things to look forward to is
Mhm.
so important. So just knowing, okay, Saturday morning, I'm painting. Sometime this week, I'm going to get some more paint. I'm going to get the
Yeah.
canvas. All that stuff gives you something to look forward to. So I love it. Well, I've got one last question for you. I'm going to give you a second to think about it. And then I'm going to brag about you while you're thinking. But my question is, what's one thing, especially as you think about our listeners, people that are listening in, what's one thing when it comes to emotion in regards to leadership in life, what's one thing you wish you would have known earlier? All right. So you think about that. And then I'm going to brag on you for a second. All right. So we've been talking with Erin Rollenhagen. She is the bomb, as you can tell. Her business is Entrepreneurial Technologies. Her book is called Soul Uprising. It's available on Amazon. It's also available on her website. Got to check that out. Just go to erinrollenhagen.com. We'll put all of that in the show notes. Erin is a prolific writer and blogger too. Her blog is amazing. It'll inspire you. So you're going to want to check that out all there at erinrollenhagen.com. All right. Did I give you enough time?
You did give me enough time.
Awesome. So what's that thing? What's that thing you wish you would have known earlier?
The thing I wish I would have known earlier is that everyone you look at that you think is killing it is killing it, but they're also going through exactly the same challenges you are.
Hmm.
I remember being on a girls' trip 10 plus years ago, and there was an article that just come out about an app we released. And all of my friends were like, oh my gosh, you're rich, you're famous, you're getting all this press. Congratulations, your life's so perfect now. And I remember taking a deep breath and telling them that that project had not made a dime, that we were actually very far in the red on it, and I had just filed for divorce.
Wow. Right.
And I think we all think when we see those great moments in other people's lives, that that's the whole story, right?
Yep.
And they don't have struggles, and that's where a lot of our self-judgment comes from.
Yeah.
But just recognize that, yeah, it's great. Mitch is doing great. My friend Katie's doing great. Everybody's doing great, and they're all experiencing challenges too.
Yep. Every single human, right?
Yep.
That's absolutely right. I love it. Erin, thank you for being so generous again. So appreciate you. And I'll look forward to having you back. I think we just need to do it an annual kind of thing. Maybe we won't even keep it to years. So look forward to having you back very soon. You're the bomb.
Thanks, Mitch.